It's called The Period. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like present period. This, of course, is quoting The Tale of Two Cities, the historical novel published in 1859 by the English author Charles Dickens. And it seems to apply very perfectly to the here and now. I am Danny Seaman. Thank you for joining me here on Straight Up at JNS Studios in Jerusalem, Israel. Well, like last week, I decided I've just used this opening here to sort of frame where we're going. And this is a very difficult times and sometimes it's amazing. Sometimes we question what is actually happening. And just like last week, I said I'll take some of the issues that are in the news and some of the items, some of the stories, and give my thoughts and comment on these things. Talking about A Tale of Two Cities, here in Israel, more accurately, is like a tale of two officers. One of the major stories this week here in Israel was the appointment of the new Mossad head of the state of Israel, which is Major General Roman Goffman, who was the military secretary to Prime Minister Netanyahu for many years. He's a major general in the IDF, also known to have fought on October 7th when the battle began. He picked up his weapon and went to fight in the streets in the south of Israel and was actually injured there in an act of bravery. So he was appointed this week as the head of Israel's Mossad. Of course, the left wing in Israel made a ruckus about that. But around the same time, a very interesting story or a comparison happened when Colonel Herman Giltman, who was also an IDF commander, and he's also of the former Soviet Union, just as Goffman is. And I say it's a very interesting story because Giltman, he decided to join the organization called Brothers in Arms, that before the war here, found it necessary to call on many Israelis to not support this government and not fight in Israel and in a way betray their oath to the state of Israel. And he sat there at the table, and there's footage of him sitting at that table. And the chief of staff of Israel, Zamir, decided this week to promote him. He was off duty at the time when he joined this political organization, but he decided to return him to the IDF and have him become in a new active position and raise him to the position of brigadier general. But the Minister of Defense decided this week that he would not accept this promotion by the chief of staff and said that anybody who was a member of this organization, the Brothers in Arms, who called for Israelis not to fight and not to join, and in a way signaled to the enemy of Israel and Hamas. And by the way, documents that were taken during the war showed that the Hamas leadership followed very closely what was going on here before October 7th, and it encouraged them. These calls for the Air Force and for the intelligence and all these organizations that were calling for basically a mutiny, that they were following this and believed that Israel, just like this organization said very clearly on the media, that Israel will not have an army, or the prime minister and Netanyahu will find, this government of Israel will find that they do not have an army standing and defending Israel on that day. Hamas took this very seriously. That was one of the things that encouraged them to go to war on October 7th. So everything we suffered on that day, anybody involved in this should never be connected again to the IDF, and they should forever be branded with this signal, Ot Kain, as we call it in Hebrew, the mark of Cain, that they should never be and serve in the military once again, and forever should be shamed for what they did before October 7th. So as we say, this tale of two cities, tale of two populations here in Israel. And if we go back to this right-wing, left-wing divide that we've had here for a very long time, that the left wing who claim that they represent most Israelis, but surprisingly, it never finds its expression, not in the polls, but in the polls after the elections, meaning the only thing that really counts in a democracy. In the free elections here in Israel, they don't seem to have that many Israelis voting for their representatives. But they continue to take to the streets, and it's been going on for many years now. Every time there's another excuse for it. And unfortunately, they took over the issue and made it into a political issue, the issue of the hostages. And now, once again, all the hostages that they said Netanyahu will never release, and Netanyahu has no interest in releasing them because he wants the war to continue. All these things that they said, like everything they said in the past, never comes out in reality. And they don't understand the damage that they caused to Israel. Not only those calling for Israelis not to the mutiny they called for at the time before October 7th, but even since then, a lot of their behavior and a lot of the conduct of the left wing in Israel has encouraged, and they don't understand the attempt here that Israel is not only facing a war, what we call the cognitive warfare, psychological warfare, the media war that's going on. There is a war to delegitimize the state of Israel, not only as a state, but the Jewish right to self-determination. This is where they're going. This is what their direction is. And around the world, left-wing organizations, the Marxists who have joined up with the jihadists, the effort, and since the inception of this whole concept of Palestine and the PLO, it's never been to assist the Palestinians or the Arab citizens or the residents of the land of Israel. They never accepted the partition plan back in 48, and they had the area there between 48 and 67. They never declared a Palestinian state. After Oslo in 1993, when Israel offered them the opportunity, and then in the year 2000, after we left the Gaza Strip, they didn't create an Arab state there. Hamas took over, and they built the foundation of what? They built a foundation, underneath, taking billions of dollars that were given to them from around the world, not to improve the lives of the Arabs that live in the Gaza Strip, but to create the underground effort to undermine the state of Israel and destroy the state of Israel, and eventually brought on the destruction of themselves, just like they did in 48 and in 67, when the Arab armies at that time tried to destroy Israel, both in 48 and 67. So they're looking in a way to delegitimize the actual right of the Jews to claim a right of nationhood here. And the left wing in Israel, unfortunately, in their political attempt to regain control in the state of Israel, are undermining the ability of the state of Israel internationally. And they don't understand it, that they're joining in and claiming that the Palestinians have a right here, and joining in, and they have this movement here that says Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. These same people who they claim refuse to be enemies are the ones who took this call from the river to the sea, which is calling for the annihilation of the Jewish state of Israel. They're not talking for a two-state. They're not talking for a partition of the land. They're calling to annihilate Israel and the entire land here become an Arab state. And the left wing in Israel are not only assisting this, they're legitimizing it, because people then turn to say, oh, you have these Israelis here who are calling for that. And these Israelis are saying that, look at this government of Israel. And they are the ones, for internal political reasons, it's being leveraged abroad. And people saying you have a right-wing extremist government here in Israel. And the issue of this, and one of the things that they don't understand that they're doing, is that they're justifying that when people are claiming that Israel's government is right-wing and extremist, and then you have these Jews around the world who are saying, oh, we're not Zionists, or they may be Zionists, but we don't support the government of Israel. Well, don't support it. We don't care. We in Israel democratically elected and voted for them. And if you have a problem with that, the place to resolve that is by offering, through politics, an alternative to the public here in Israel. And if they feel that it's acceptable to them, they'll vote for your representatives. But since you know you have nothing to offer, and all you have to offer is hate, then what happens is that people take your accusations against Netanyahu and they leverage it to undermine the legitimacy of the state of Israel. And if you think that your claims, or it's because of Netanyahu or Ben Gvir or anybody else, I just want to remind you that Rabin, who's the one who advanced the Oslo process, and recognized the PLO and ceded territory to the so-called Palestinians, he was also criticized around the world as being an extremist. He was also ostracized by those before Oslo and considered to be also a war criminal by people around the world. And it's not going to change. I said this in my previous, and I say it once again, a Zionist and a non-Zionist, a right-wing Israeli, a left-wing Israeli, they all enter the bar. The bartender will say they don't serve Jews there. It doesn't matter what we call ourselves. Keep our debates and discussions among ourselves. Don't try to get others from the outside involved in it because they don't care about our differences. They'll kill us all equally. If among these people, there's one thing they can agree upon is that they don't like Jews, period. They don't care about the differences that we hold here. And I've said this before also, that concessions, compromises, anything on our side, it doesn't change. It only encourages the other side. It increases their appetite and their belief, oh, the Jews are weak, we can destroy them. The only way is what we did in the past few years, showing them if they mess with Israel, this is the consequence, what is happening in Gaza. And if you'll pay the price and don't try, our internal differences are not an indication to the other side that the Jews are weak and we should take advantage of it. We're not weak. We have our debates. We have our discussions. But if you mess with us, any of you, you're going to end up like the Gaza Strip. Remember that. That's an important lesson of the past 2 years. The foreign media very quickly are the ones who pick up on these stories of what's going on here in Israel. I mentioned this in my last podcast and I gave some examples of how they're very quick. They'll take any opportunity to find things inside of Israel to focus on, to show how terrible Israel is. It doesn't matter that these are things that happen in any country around the world. If the Jews are doing it, it's major news, and they focus on these things, and they try to let people abroad believe that this is the Israel. This is what is really happening here, because they're looking to get, like people who are getting clicks, the media are looking for you to follow them, look into the stories, and unfortunately, Jews is news and Israel is interesting, and they'll continue doing that. Another issue this week that's being picked up right now is that in a meeting of Israeli ambassadors and members of the foreign ministry from around the world met this week. They have an annual meeting which they raise issues, etc. The Prime Minister usually speaks to them. He spoke to them this week, and he used the term that Israel is a global power. And already a lot of people are saying here in Israel, oh, how can he say that? We're a small country in the Middle East. We're obviously a local power, that we've proved that in the past 2 years. Why is the Prime Minister saying Israel is a global power? Well, I think this you combine that with two things that had happened this week. One is the report that the American administration, the U.S. administration put out, changing and shifting the direction of Americans' internal security, or the security of the United States, and also the invitation to Netanyahu by Trump to come to the United States by the end of this month. These things are very much connected. And how is this connected? Very simply. This is also connected to what Netanyahu said. What leads the world is interests. You can have friends, you can have friendships, you can have joint values, but at the end of the day, every country will do what is in their best interest. And so Trump may be a very big supporter of the state of Israel. He may love the Jews. The Mossad may control him. Wink, wink at those idiots who believe that kind of nonsense. But when it comes down to it, he is the president of the United States. He will do what is in the best interest of the United States. When he understands that Israel is a great ally and how much it contributes to the United States, he is going to be supportive not only of the state of Israel, but also of that Israeli leader who he believes is leading Israel in that direction. And that brings us to Netanyahu. And when Netanyahu said that Israel is a global power, it's because of our position here and what had happened in the past 2 years, and our connections also with Russia, for example. Netanyahu has a very special relationship with the president of Russia, and President Trump understands that. And he's looking to shift, and he's looking to bring Russia into the connection with the West, understanding that Europe is lost. Europeans are on the verge of an internal conflict on their own. The United States cannot rely on Western Europe. Eastern Europe is a different story. But he does need Russia to be very much in sync with the United States. And he knows that Israel can assist with that. And he knows that Israel has this very good relationship with Russia, and especially with Putin personally. So Trump is looking at that and understanding that Netanyahu understands how international politics works. Unfortunately, a lot of Israelis don't get that. A lot of Israelis still have that attitude, oh, we have to do what the United States wants. And then they go and they accuse Netanyahu of being the way they are. Netanyahu is not like that. He understands our place. He understands that we are a small country, but he also understands what we can contribute if we know how to use our strength here in the Middle East and use that for the benefit of the United States. He knows that it will make us a very important partner to the United States global program and global plan. So Trump invited him because also Trump's plan for the Middle East includes the end of the war with Gaza, and not only the Abrahamic Accords, but first getting over and bringing an end to what is happening in Gaza, which we have to a large degree, but also the second phase is the disarming and the breaking down of Hamas as a terrorist organization. He has seen in recent weeks that a lot of the international community do not want to be part of that because, first, they're not stupid. They understand that when you're dealing with terrorists, you don't want to endanger your own troops. For what purpose? They're all more than happy to be part of it for the economic benefits of the future of what may happen with the Gaza Strip and the Middle East. But endangering their troops is a whole different issue. And we're also talking about Americans in this case. So it's going to be up to Israel to do it once they come down to it and understanding that you cannot, there's no talking and reasoning and speaking logical to Hamas that, look, you've endangered your people for this long. You know, it's over with. Try to do what is in the best interest of your people. They don't care. They're looking at jihad. They believe that sacrificing their people, and this is an Islamic belief, that sacrifice for Allah, sacrifice for Islam is the greatest thing they can bring upon their people. And they've been very good at doing that so far, at sacrificing them. But in order to move forward with how the West sees it and how Israel sees the future of the Middle East, Israel is the only ones who are going to have to be able to take care of this, finish the job with Hamas, break them down, and then move into the second stage. So Trump has been putting pressure on Israel because at the end of the day, it's not his hostages and it's not the body. We have one hostage left there, an Israeli hostage that they hold on to his body. They were supposed to retrieve and return all of them within 72 hours. I think we're at the over 2 months now. They haven't done that. We're still giving them we're giving the opportunity to do this peacefully. But we're not moving into the next stage until we get the last body returned to us. And in this particular case, Trump is hoping that he'll be able to convince Netanyahu, and we've said it very clearly, this government has been very clear about it, that we're not moving to the second stage until we get the last body returned to us. And then we'll allow them the opportunity. So there have been members of the media here, and I mentioned the media before, how they like to warp things and how they like to give you an impression of things that are not what is actually happening here. And a lot of that has to do with Israeli media, left-wing Israeli mainstream media, who contribute by anonymous sources that they claim to have among this administration. Well, I personally, working with the media for many years and working it through government, I can give you several examples. I won't name names, but one prominent member of the New York Times, who everybody is very quick to wave him as being this good journalist. We knew that guy was a fool, was a buffoon. I'm talking back in the times of Shamir. And we would plant things with him, giving him these stories. The idiot would give the story out there, not checking sources, and we would use him for our own. So I see this administration doing the same thing with some of these self-important journalists on the Israeli side. The only thing is that Western media then quote these people and believe, oh, there's some stress going on between Netanyahu and Trump is very angry. And every time it comes out that that's not what's going on. They have a very close, serious, special relationship because Trump understands that one of the few international leaders in the West that understand what he wants to do and understand international relations is Netanyahu. And so he's bringing him not to D.C. for another. They said he's going to bring him to D.C. and scold him there. No, he's inviting him to Mar-a-Lago, to his personal home between Christmas and the New Year's, the holiday season in the United States. A leader does not invite another international leader to his home to scold him. They're going there because they're both are focused on the future and what needs to be done. And Netanyahu will be there together with Mrs. Netanyahu that rubs a lot of Israelis the wrong way, but the hell with them. We're very happy to see her enjoying being with her husband, and she's really the foundation of the support for our prime minister. So I personally am very happy that she's going to be with him there, and they will plan the future of what is going to be happening in the immediate next few weeks and months. So that's what's going on there. On another topic, NGO Monitor this week, and I believe one of the other podcasts here we'll be doing an interview with them. I may interview them next week on this. NGO Monitor, which is a watchdog group against all these different non-governmental organizations, these organizations that claim to be for human rights, etc., they looked into what they're doing. They have a report that they published last Wednesday, in which they looked into what they were doing for many years. And they found out that through internal Hamas documents, Israel, when taking over Hamas headquarters, the underground headquarters of Hamas throughout Gaza over the past 2 years, they found internal documents of Hamas in Arabic. Luckily, we have people here who know Arabic in our country, who work with our intelligence. Anybody asking how we knew that? And they were able to go through these documents. They found that Hamas were systematically co-opted nonprofits affiliated with the United Nations and governments around the world in multiple Western countries, including the United States, by the way. And they reveal how Hamas placed its allies into key positions to exploit these organizations for the purposes of Hamas. So there's nothing new for this on this particular issue. And Israel has said this very often. You know and you see this in times when they claim to have journalists. Well, I can tell you from my personal knowledge and my experience working with the media back 25 years ago already that we knew, because any place in these non-democratic entities, which are and terrorist-run entities, but it's also with Arab countries themselves, whether it's Jordan or Lebanon through the Hezbollah or Syria or the PLO and Hamas. Nobody can work there. These are not democratic countries. Media cannot work there freely. They have to be associated and accepted by the locals and by the local leadership and those controlling the areas. And how do they do that? By making sure they have their own people in place. So when you see them wearing a jacket that says press on it, they're not press. They're using that. It's a disguise. They may be giving information and reporting, but they're members, active members of Hamas. And when they're taken out, they have official burials for them, whether it's PLO or whether it's Hamas or whether it's the Islamic Jihad or whether it's a PFLP. They all give these journalists, quote unquote, ceremonies before they bury them, and they recognize them as being activists and being terrorists among their organizations. So there's nothing new with that particular thing. But an interesting thing came out of B'Tselem, one of the major Israeli left-wing human rights organizations, that back in 2014, they had a meeting. And very interesting that this meeting, one of their activists was a person called Sinwar, who was just released from the Israeli prison around that time. And he was gathering information for B'Tselem about what is happening in the Gaza Strip. And they called him one of their brave activists. Sinwar, who then became the person who was involved in October 7th and led to the October 7th of being head of Hamas. So this Sinwar was an activist of B'Tselem, a human rights Israeli organization with connections internationally. You get a lot of international money. Sinwar was one of their brave activists who they have quoting on film talking about what he was doing and what was happening to so-called Palestinians in Gaza around the time. And these are the credible sources that the media tell you that they're getting you information from such credible sources, whether it's human rights organizations or the activists for them. And here's just, once again, over time, the truth takes a while, but eventually the truth comes out and we learn what is really happening behind the scenes. And talking about the media, it's very interesting. I saw this week that the White House published an update on They created this thing called the wall of shame of American media. I love this, working with the media for so many years, that we should be adopting this here as well. And they launched a location where people can complain about these media. Now, we know, and again, last week I mentioned this, of how the media, over years and years and years, they make these reports, and then people call them out, and they find that they've violated their own principles, and then they'll issue corrections, and they'll apologies, and then a week later they're doing the same thing once again. But here what the White House did is that the public can then submit complaints, and they had 450,000 complaints last week that were submitted against media outlets and journalists. This is brilliant, and the most criticized media outlets, and that's why I'm saying maybe Israel doesn't need to do it, because we'd have the same names here: the Washington Post, Reuters, MSNBC, the New York Times, surprise, surprise, and the Associated Press, the same organizations that fail miserably for years in their coverage here, because they're not doing this serious, responsible journalism. They're getting their stories, and they're collaborating at times with these terrorist organizations, getting the story out from how they want it, because it serves their own political interests. So that's an interesting story. And combining that with one last item from this week, and if we're talking about shame, I think nothing is more shameful than what happened this week when Hollywood, shame and Hollywood that goes together today, that Hollywood A-listers, they more than 200 of them, signed this letter that was released that they're calling for the release of Marwan Barghouti, who is in jail in Israel for the murder of Israelis, 5 cases of murder. He was a prominent member of the PLO, of the Palestinian Authority, out of Ramallah, and back in the early 2000s, he was arrested for being involved in 5 cases of murder of Israelis. One, by the way, which was a Greek Orthodox monk who was on his way from Ma'ale Adumim to Jerusalem on that major highway. He was involved in the shooting incident there, where a Greek Orthodox monk was killed by his forces, the forces that he led, and he was captured by Israel. And they are calling him a hero. And some of the names that we have here, which is very, some of the usual names: Mark Ruffalo, the imbecile, Tilda Swinton, Sting, surprisingly, all these self-righteous, Paul Simon, why is he on that list for some reason? So these people that, instead of doing the right thing and calling on the Arabs in Judea and Samaria and Gaza to learn the lessons, stop voting and electing terrorists as your leaders. Start calling out your leaders who have brought these horrendous things upon you. Instead of doing that, which should be the rightful thing, that if you really care about Palestinians is what you should be calling on them to do, instead of supporting this miserable person like Marwan Barghouti, who went on a hunger strike after he was arrested and found guilty in the court in Israel. He went on a hunger strike, and then we have footage of him eating chocolates during the time, and chocolate bars. He's such a loser, such a wimp. I know this because when he was apprehended by the Israeli forces, my brother was one of the forces, one of the soldiers that were in the force that took him, and he was whining like a little, won't say the word, I promise. Somebody here in the comments who said he preferred I didn't curse, but he was whining like a little wimp and crying when he was apprehended. So these are the leaders that the miserable imbeciles in Hollywood want to be released so they can lead the Palestinian people. So that is the major issues that happened this week. I hope you find these interesting. I also have an interview with an Ethiopian Jew on the story of the Ethiopian Jewry in Israel. Check that out on one of my other JNS podcasts. Thank you for being here this week. See you again next week. I'm Danny Seaman. You're watching Straight Up on JNS.